So the purpose of this workshop is really geared toward faculty teaching service learning and the ways in which we can deepen our service. So the idea that you start service learning and you're going to be great at all of it, it's just not possible, right? That's just not how service learning is going to work, just like it's not how anything in life works. And if there is something that works that way, please tell me about it later. I'm very interested. So it's a baby step process, right? So we want to be able to catch people wherever we are and enhance. So I've been teaching service learning for, I don't even know how long. I've been teaching it for pretty much as long as I've been here. And every semester, I'm trying to make it a little bit better, right? I'm trying to get it a little bit deeper. And there are so many ways in which we can do that, but sometimes we get stuck, right? Where we're like, I want to do better, but I have so much going on in life, or I just made this big change and I need to sit with it for a minute, or whatever it is. But coming together as a group to be able to say, hey, how would you make this better? Right? And be able to bounce ideas off of each other. So that was where the idea for this workshop came about. And we've been doing this for a few years now. And every time I end up coming up with something for my class where I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to do that next semester. So Damien thought that the timing of this would be great in late April, where we can start to prepare for fall, when we can start thinking, okay, how would we want to go a little deeper in fall? So, Damien, do you want to add anything to that, or should we get into the taxonomy?
Yeah, no, I think that's thanks, Missy, because that's essentially one of the things that we found, particularly with the pandemic, is to reflect on both our systems and our manner of being able to bring people into them, encouraging the service learning in the classroom. And so one of the great challenges we've kind of found, certainly in my school, is that invariably there's a lot of interest, but the time is one of those things that's difficult to kind of onboard people into the process of service learning, and invariably ends up coming across as being too late. It's like, oh, we didn't have time to plan it, or not managing timeframes. Now that could be a personal thing. As I mentioned, it's not exactly my strength, but the other thing being that at this stage of the academic year, there are a lot of lessons and a lot of reflection that we can do in preparation for next year. So what sort of things have we learnt individually from our partners? And I was going to say, it's actually great to see Elaine here as well, because Ashley, can you put her in my group? That would be awesome. Thank you. Just, no, nothing against you, Missy, but I want Elaine. So that we can actually have that interaction to hear about different ways, different benefits, different intentions, and really looking at a means to engage the community partner in the classroom. And I think that's essentially what we're trying to convey with this session. So the idea of trying to deepen service learning and finding ways that we can use our resources to encourage faculty and community partners to be more engaged in the process is exactly why I think this time of the year is really good. Everyone's kind of just going, they're running on fumes trying to get to the end of the semester, and if it's like, oh, I can knock this off, but as they get into the summer break, it's probably a good time for us to take advantage of those intellectual resources and share them amongst others who are like-minded in preparation for the new year. So that's my thinking. We'll reflect on it afterwards and see if it was a good idea or not.
I think it is. I think it is. So the documents that Ashley dropped into the chat, if you're able to open the taxonomy framework, you'll see when you open it why I'm not going to share my screen and show it to you. It's like micro print. So I don't know how they get letters that small, but is everybody able to open it? Okay, so you can zoom in where you're reading rather than having to follow where anybody else is. But you can see, so this is the taxonomy that the CSU has adapted. And you can see that there are different essential elements of.
Missy, do you want me to try and share it? I can certainly have a crack at that if you want me to tackle the technology.
Well, I mean, this one I actually technically can't. I have the savvy to share it. I just think that because the print is so small, that if everybody can open their own, then you can zoom in where you're wanting to read rather than having to read where everybody is. So you can see that there are these essential elements that are listed in the green bar. And those are going to be, when we're doing service learning, you need to be somewhere in each of those for it to officially be service learning according to the CSU. So that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to teach service learning if you can't do one of them, right? We want people to be teaching service learning or moving in that direction, even if it's, again, those baby steps. So as you're looking through the document, this is an opportunity for you to reflect on one of your own courses. And you can open, there's the blank taxonomy rubric. If you open that, you'll see that it has the essential elements listed, but it allows for you to make some notes in terms of where you think your course is falling in each of those areas. Is everybody able to open both of those, and is that clear? So why don't we take a few minutes for people to read through that and for you to think about your course and where your course falls in each of those. And if you teach more than one course, just think about one specific one that you would like to deepen. Once we've had a chance to do that, we'll break into groups where we'll have a chance to talk about maybe some things that were surprising or some places that became evident where you'd want to move, a little bit and bounce some ideas about how to do that. Okay, so I promise I'll stop talking now. So why don't we take another couple of minutes here, and then we'll break up into groups to talk about it. And yes, as Meredith pointed out, we have one of the people who came up with this taxonomy, the lead on it, Seth, is here. So if you have questions about the taxonomy, we are fortunate that we can ask questions about it too.
Wait a minute. I think someone else was at that table developing it as well. So let's share the wealth or the responsibility or the blame. Meredith.
Yes, it was really one of my favorite projects, but there's no question, Seth, that you were the lead.
So on that note, can we have Meredith in one room and Seth in another? That might be a good option.
All right, everybody made it back safely. Good. One nice thing about Zoom is the travel time is excellent. So we'd like to use this time to sort of debrief about the conversations that happened in the different breakout rooms. So we had a rich and fascinating conversation about sort of the push and pull between reciprocity with the community partner and civic learning. So
we had what I thought was a really productive session. I think the benefit for me as someone who's engaged but lacking experience in service learning, I find myself wanting to draw on the experience of the audience, and I had nothing but great and highly experienced colleagues who will take over the discussion of what the different elements were that represented deepening relationships and methods for kind of improving the role more effectively of service learning in the classroom. So for me, it was a session enjoyed as much as I do. You might have even got something out of it too, I'm hoping.
Something that you were looking at your taxonomy, felt like, okay, here's an area where I need a little improvement. You had some conversation.
She's not going to like me for it, but if I can call on you, Juan, I think as someone who's wanting to take who's wanting to incorporate service learning in the classroom, I called on her first and really put the fire under her. So she's going to hate me after this, but I think she'll be a really good illustration of some of the things that she picked.
I think she had to go to a student meeting.
I'm sure she did. Yeah, so I was going to say, Elaine, can I call on you for that then? I actually thought that there were some brilliant speakers in my session, and I don't include myself in that one. I was fascinated.
I had phrased, thank you so much for being so welcoming in this space. What did I say? So I was speaking about the relationships that are important between the lecturers, between the person who's organizing the course and the nonprofit hosts themselves, and the importance of carrying it on semester to semester to semester. That's really great, so that you have the same person who is your contact, and you can keep that going as students cycle through your classes. I also recommended that the classroom be a place where they can emphasize their learning and reflect on their contribution and stay motivated. It's often hard for the student, from the nonprofit perspective, to see their contribution in the wide world, where they come in to save the world. Rochelle was mentioning the white savior complex, which could be from anybody. But they come in and they think that they can solve all your problems in 6 weeks. So it's important that we teach them that they can't do that, but they're still really valued in the nonprofit level, and then have the classroom also reiterate that too, and keep them engaged.
Yeah, I think that's, and for me, thanks very much, Elaine. It's great to have a community partner here as well, to be able to talk from the other partners' side. I was just sitting there in awe, listening to Fawn and Rochelle talk about their experience and how Fawn, for example, was giving some great illustrations of the importance of explaining the process to students, giving them the opportunity to make that connection between what happens with how the family is part of community. Rochelle's example, where she's been in the role, she said, for 8 months, and I was just listening to her rattle off her experiences and just going, wow, I've been doing this role for 2 years, and I'm just I'm sitting back going, okay, I've got a lot to learn here. So I mean, it was a really good opportunity just to listen to the collective wisdom of others who are heavily engaged in, and seeing how they'd moved on from the process of introducing service learning to the classroom, and just through partners like Elaine and other faculty members who are highly engaged, have actually been able to work through that process, just from introducing it through to it being a collective, collaborative process to them to work in the best interests of both the students, the faculty member, and the community partner. So they were really good discussions from my perspective.
So
how did your session go, Missy?
Yeah, I was just about to call people out from my session. So Seth or Adele, do either of you want to talk about sort of the push-pull relationship we were talking about, and how we kind of got some insight into that?
I feel like I've spoken a lot, but I'll try to be brief. And then Adele, and then Adele, you can add, or other listeners. Adele's projects and her service learning class are really organized around the projects that her community partners have identified for the class to accomplish. And so it's really driven by that. Whereas in my class, the course is really driven by the civic learning outcomes that we've identified, which really create lenses around issues of diversity, justice, power, privilege, and oppression, and identity. And those are the lenses that the students take out into the community. So I felt very high on the framework around civic learning and explicitness of the civic learning goals, and really low and sort of wanting and feeling inferior around the community partner reciprocity, because it's like our students are taking these lenses out into the community and saying, I'll do anything, but let me use these lenses. Whereas I think there's a whole richness around joining together in that agenda around, okay, here are the actual projects, and how do those projects are they reflected in these lenses, and let's talk about that. And maybe that might change the project, and that also might change the lenses we're using. And that's not happening in my class.
So in listening to the conversation, I was really struck by the push and the pull between those two elements of service learning, right? That if you're highly focused on the reciprocity with the community partner, then some of these other things may decline. Whereas if you're highly emphasizing one of the other areas, and in Seth's example, the civic engagement component, then that reciprocity can decline. And what I love about this is that it's all service learning, is that we can do service learning in a variety of ways. And as Seth said, maybe we can all meet in the middle and have a big party one day where we can work towards that balance of, how do we start to shift these? And we, while Adele went from the partner need to the project, Seth went from the civic engagement component, the civic learning, to the project, and then came partner need. Whereas what I think that I do in my course was the project, the partner need that we found related to civic learning, and then came the project and backed back up into that. Like, okay, how does this, we know how we meet the partners, needs, we know how this relates to the community, but that there are always these different angles in which we can do it. And that's one of the things that I love most about talking to people who teach service learning, is that you see all of the different ways in which people can come about it. So I know the faculty fellows at Sonoma, the five of us here, have had conversations about how we've integrated service learning with our RTP process, and we've all come at it from really different angles, but have all accomplished similar objectives in doing that. And it's similar when we talk about the pedagogy of service learning, that there are these different key elements and you want to find ways to incorporate them, but there's so many different ways in which that can be done. Any other thoughts about conversations that you've had, or about pieces that you would like to enhance, or ways in which you would want to do that?
If I can just conclude, I think from the key lessons that I picked up from the session that were really important to me, or certainly will certainly help me deepen service learning, was the value in grounding the students early on in the process. I mean, if you've gone to that point and you've been able to work with a community partner to integrate an element of service learning, just that recognition that their ambition, we need to find ways to save the world. And I think their opportunity is to turn the community partner into the greatest achieving ever non-profit organisation on the planet, just by their contribution. And then when they recognise that actually the fact that they were down picking fruit and vegetables for the local people was something that helped the partner work on ways to help them integrate their business with them with the classroom more effectively is really a good starting point. You know, that's the sort of thing they can see here, that they've made that contribution, and the contribution in and of itself is as helpful as it might be from trying to change the world. So be ambitious, have that view, but recognise that that's it, and also trying to avoid them getting complacent or disengaged when they get to that point where they go, well, I'm not going to save the world, and they might drop off the planet halfway through the semester because they've realised that what they originally were viewing of it is not the outcome they'd expected. So that's certainly a lesson which I'll be putting into the classroom, just helping people to recognise that. I think that's a great way of looking. It was a very important message that I picked up in our session.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And that's something that I talk about when every semester I ask my students, how many of you have taken a service learning course? And some of them always raise their hands, and I say, okay, what is service learning? And none of them can answer it. And that's something that I think is a key component of service learning, is that it's a reciprocal relationship. And this isn't, the students are gaining something unique from this experience. It is educational, it's service learning, right? They're gaining some educational insight through this experience. So again, with my students going to the museum, they get to go to a children's museum and see actual human children who we've been talking about in the classroom, and watch them interact with these exhibits. And then they can see, oh, look at that. That's what she's been talking about in class, right? So they're getting something unique from this partnership as well as contributing to it. And so I appreciate that perspective. I think is important to share with students. And yes, Seth, thank you for putting that document in the chat. That's useful and will be nice to look over. So thank you for sharing that. So thank you everybody for your time and for coming. And please keep us posted on how your courses are going. For those of you who are Sonoma State faculty, you have faculty fellows who are here to help you in this process. You can always reach out to us. For those of you who aren't Sonoma State, feel free to reach out to us too. We like the broader conversations as well. And thank you for everybody for coming from elsewhere too. That was hard for me to get out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.